How did you come to write this book? I know you've had a history of combining, I would say, American medicine with Oriental traditions. How did you come to decide to write a book, 8 Steps to Love?
Well, I was in practice for some 20 years in clinical practice as a child psychologist and as a traditional psychologist, seeing people from ages of 4 to in their 70s. And I saw the same kind of conflicts again and again, whether it was with parents and their children, or marital couples, or bosses and employees. And I just thought it was time for somebody to really put something together that people could use, because it was the same kinds of ineffective patterns. However deeply rooted they may have been, they could be addressed in a more an educational way, really. So I thought it was time to do something like that people could use for themselves and apply it with some really quick, effective principles.
So yours is really a practical, I mean, I've read parts of the book. I mean, it's really a practical guide to helping people overcome. And interestingly enough, like most people try to avoid stress and conflict, which I guess ultimately is a good idea.
Right.
But you try to use that as a tool to come into a place of harmony in a place.
Exactly.
Why don't you just describe that a little?
You know, one of the things that, interestingly, in the evolution of the book, going from the basic psychology points and so on, was the idea that in the spiritual teachings, a lot of times the ascended masters and so on, Saint Germain was noted to have said that really our bodies become incapacitated because of living according to, not according to the law of love, peace, and harmony, but because of discord in thought and feeling. And so because we're bombarded and we do have discord, what we want to do is take that constricted energy, you know, sadness, anger, depression, fear, all contract us. And so physiologically we want to be able to shift that back. So insofar as if we could be in a place of bliss all the time, as the teachers would suggest as possible, that's good. That's a win.
That is good.
And if we're not,
that would be good.
And if we're not, though,
right.
We can shift to that.
Right.
And that's the idea, to really go back from contracted energy of all the negative emotions into the expansive energy of love. And that means, in a really broad sense, doing what you love in a given situation, focusing on what it is you would want, not what you don't want. And that really makes a whole different mental focus and physical shifting of the energy.
So, I mean, in some ways, it's almost like the glass is half full and then half empty. I mean, it's just, is it like just a little switch that changes? Well, how would you describe the process as you're going through?
Right. Okay. The context of the process is to really awaken to what we really are within. That we really have a place within us that's a consciousness that is characterized as calm, and also as a caring consciousness, as well as a connecting and a continuous. Now, what those 4 things are really describe the core self. And so what we're trying to do is access that in the heat of the moment, in the heat of conflict. So you come out of a Deepak Chopra, wonderful presentation, or one of the other spiritual teachers, and you're in traffic in California and road rage hits, right? That's when you want to be able to take and do the steps. And the steps really are geared to access that consciousness of the core self. And so it's not something you create, it's something that you take steps to get out of the way and access that.
So it's almost like peeling an onion. I mean, that you really are the core self, and then all these other things kind of
exactly
come over it, and you can't access the core self. You can't really experience it.
Well, you're taking 4 roads. The physical road, which is really breathing, stopping, breathing in, I stop and still my mind, breathing out, I stop and still my body, and begin that way. Then you're doing the mental road, which is shifting your focus. So from what the negative emotion is, and one of the steps in the mental shifting is really what I call the shifting energy and focus exercise. Every one of your negative emotions tells you something you don't like. And love as an emotion, as opposed to a metaphysical reality and an ultimate reality, as an experience, is telling us that we love and we value something, that something is important to us. Fear tells us something important is in danger, moves us to run. Anger tells us something important is in danger, moves us to fight. Sadness tells us something that we love has been lost, moves us to tears and acceptance. So we take, in a given situation, say I'm angry. My anger is telling me that. I hate it when, as you breathe in and then fill in the blank, you yell at me. And that's because I love it better. It gives me great joy when you talk softly to me. Now, at times in my seminars, I call that the good Italian. Because
it comes with pasta.
I hate it when you yell at me, and that's because I love it. It gives me great joy when you talk softly to me. So you make that shift, and any one of the negative emotions would do that.
Now, does everyone have the same core self, would you say?
Yes. There was a wonderful spiritual teacher, and I don't remember exactly who said this. He said, I am a wave. One day I will become water. That is the first fallacy. Remember the oneness. So in a sense, there was another thing that kind of reminded me of this. One of my teenage patients, when I was in practice, brought in a book on Zen, and it showed a little cartoon of a little wave comparing itself to a big wave. And so, yeah, everybody is connected, and that's part of the thing about the core self. Once we're in a deeper level of it, we're connecting. And that's one of the ways we know this is through the Reiki healing that I do. One of the symbols we use is one that says the core self, or the God in me acknowledges the God in you, the Namaste. But really, it's sort of the oneness symbol. So how does somebody lay their hands on a visualization of someone while I'm on the East Coast and they're in Africa, and have something happen instantly? It really attests to that connection, that oneness. Yeah.
And you see that all the time because you do remote healings. That's one of the things that... Why don't you talk about... I know that in 1995 you were going along in your like allopathic in a way practice, and you had some spiritual background, but not. But you had a certain experience that said, this is a new direction, or this is you have to take something else in. Why don't you talk about that a little?
I was in Salem, Massachusetts.
The witch trial.
Yeah. And I was at a beautiful little store called Pyramid Books, and a wonderful woman was coming out of the bookstore and had purchased a book on Reiki, and she was dressed in a white dress, a dark skin, jet black hair, and she turned out to be from Guatemala. And so she was teaching a seminar that weekend, and I was accompanied by someone who was already level 1 Reiki and wanted to take the class. Well, I wasn't sure I had any room for it. But that night, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm awakened by a purple light that was both kind of internal and external. I could feel it pulsating between my eyes, which I later realized is the third eye, the sixth chakra, and so on. I didn't really know it at that point. And I would feel this energy shoot into me, and I was a little bit freaked out by it, so I would refuse the permission to stay, and it kept leaving. So the next day, I spoke to the teacher, and she said, I think you might want to take this class. So I did. And then at the end of the day, as I was leaving, it had rained all day. There was intersecting rainbows across the road leading back to the inn where I was staying. That night, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, again, the purple light came. This time I called on my Reiki master guide, and you do a meditation as you're being attuned to Reiki. And you meet your guide, and I had actually met 3 different spiritual teachers, and the first was Christ. So I kind of thought, well, maybe I made this up because of my background growing up as an Episcopalian and whatnot. But as it happened, it was a very emotional experience. So that night, okay, the purple light comes, so I say, I call upon my Reiki master guide, Lord Jesus Christ. If this is good for me, I accept it. If not, I ask you to protect me from it. With that, a slight darkness passed across my eyes, as though you're at the beach and the clouds block the sun for a moment. And a beautiful white light about